Hi everyone, and welcome to the Monomyth Diaries, a bi-monthly podcast where ordinary people get to share their hero's journey. I'm Mandi.
And I'm Karen, and we'll be your hosts. Each episode will feature a hero who will share their journey of growth.
We'll hear stories about forgiveness, survival, determination, and much more.
We're glad you're joining us because we all have a monomyth to share and someone out there needs to hear it.
Welcome back to the Monomyth Diaries, to our second episode. Just a quick reminder to our audience that this is an advice-free zone. Take what you like and leave the rest. This is my personal journey or my monomyth only.
All right, so at the end of our episode 1, we left off with you calling Diane and her telling you she's going to pick you up on Monday. So let's talk about Diane and Pete. What was it about their relationship that you wanted, and how did meeting them change your perspective?
Diane and Pete. Oh man. Okay, so I worked with Diane for about 5 years before I knew anything about her being in a program. We worked at a school for children with special needs, and it was a super stressful environment.
Okay.
When you're working with special needs population, you've got obviously kids that are a little more difficult, and you have parents who are grieving and learning to deal with, their children. You've got a lot of administrators that you're working with and a lot of additional outside professionals. At any rate, so she and I are working together side by side in a classroom. We were both teachers together. So she and I worked together with 10 students. And she actually was nicknamed at one point the Child Whisperer.
Oh.
Yeah, she was pretty amazing. She just had this gift for behaving with grace and dignity, no matter the situation, no matter whether there was conflict or stress. She just handled everything so patiently. She was super understanding. And during those 5 years, we became very good friends. We started spending a lot of time together outside of work. We'd go shopping together. Sometimes we'd have dinner together. And I was slowly getting introduced to her husband as well. And it's important to note that she is also could be my mother, right? So she's currently now in her mid-70s when Pete's in his 80s. So of course I met her, obviously, like 25 years ago. And so Pete used to come into the classroom and help us sometimes. Wow. And so I started to meet him this way. And he'd come in and he was always happy and jovial and, what can I do for you guys? And they were so cute. And they just interacted so nicely together. Their relationship was just beautiful. I don't know how else to explain it. I never saw them fight or have disagreements. And even if they did, if they weren't on the same page, they talk things out. It was just something that I wasn't really used to.
Right.
And I was thinking one of the examples of, even when she was working with the students, and I didn't know this at the time because I wasn't in program yet, she used to say things to these kids who knew they were different, right? And she would say, "You're perfectly imperfect." And she always worked with them so that they understood that they had gifts. Some things were struggles, but they were really good at other things. And she just had this beautiful way of talking kids down when they were emotional or upset. So Diane and Pete, super instrumental in my life. Yeah.
Oh, great. So what an incredible individual. So Diane picks you up on Monday. Where does she take you?
Yes. So just backing up a little bit, I know in the last episode I told you that I had called her, my husband was misbehaving again, and she said, "I'll pick you up on Monday," right? Mm-hmm. And so she's picking me up to take me to an Al-Anon meeting. Al-Anon is the sister program of AA, is how I refer to it. AA being Alcoholics Anonymous. And so Alcoholics Anonymous is to help people stop drinking. And learn tools to not drink and handle life, pretty much in a simple way of saying. Right. And Al-Anon is a program that models those same 12 steps. We use the serenity prayer just like they do. We use all the same guiding principles. So she's picking me up to take me to this program that is designed for people who aren't the alcoholic but are married to or involved in some way, whether it's a parent-child or child-parent relationship or a friend, an aunt or uncle, because they are bothered by someone else's drinking. That's really the only qualification to go to an Al-Anon meeting, is just that somebody's drinking bothers you or somebody's drinking has affected you in some way. Right. And so for me, obviously, I grew up with two parents who were active drinkers. They weren't proclaimed alcoholics. They never said they were alcoholics. But looking back, I obviously know that, they drank too much. So that's where I went.
So what were your initial thoughts and feelings during your first Al-Anon meeting?
It was stressful.
Okay.
I'm not going to lie. It was, anxiety producing. I had a lot of fear. It's like going into the unknown, right? But I was also super curious. Super curious to learn what it was that made Diane and Pete. She swore that this is why she behaved with so much grace and dignity, that this is what changed her, and she didn't always used to be that way. So of course I had some natural curiosity as well. And then while I was at the meeting, and all the meetings are a little different, but they all follow a set of guidelines. But during my first one, there was a person who was leading the meeting and a person who was chairing the meeting. And so it was on some topic, and I'll be honest, it was a long time ago and I don't remember what that particular meeting topic was about, but in that meeting, they focused on solutions. So everything was, there's this problem and what are some solutions that people have tried. And so people take turns in that meeting sharing, things that have worked for them. And so I started hearing all of these stories, about how people were handling unhealthy situations. And so I started to feel a little bit of relief at that meeting, to know that I wasn't the only one struggling with these kinds of things. But really at the end of the day, I had this overpowering sense still that I didn't belong there. I still wasn't convinced that alcohol was my problem. But again, it's only my first meeting. But I did stay for Diane. I really didn't want to disappoint her. And I know we talked about in the first episode that I have, I have fear of abandonment, right? And so I have this people pleasing in me. Right. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to please you so that you won't leave. And that's how I felt in the beginning of attending Al-Anon meetings. So, like, at the end of this meeting, Diane said, well, I'll pick you up again next week. So I really couldn't get out of it, right? She was really gentle in saying, well, I'll just pick you up next Monday. See you next Monday, right? Like, we're going to do this. And in that very first meeting, she also did something that was so important. Right. She assigned herself to be my sponsor. Oh, wow. A lot of times when you're new to Al-Anon, you kind of wait and you get to know people and then you ask somebody to be your sponsor. But she knew me well enough to know that I was never going to do that. I mean, she was just so amazing at knowing exactly what I needed, by saying, I'll pick you up, I'll be your sponsor. But I will say that, gradually I do start attending every single Monday. I do start working a program with her, but again, because I'm working this program for her, not for me. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. So let's just back up for 1 second here. Can you share with us what's the state of your marriage at this point before
let's talk a little bit more about that. Because that's really ultimately that situation where Diane tells me about Al-Anon, right? Yes. Okay, so my relationship with my ex-husband, who at the time was my husband, was super rocky. We weren't married very long, I'll be honest. In total, we were married about 4 years. Okay. Dated for a couple, married for 4. But during those 4 years, something was just off. My gut was telling me something was off. I wasn't very good yet at trusting my gut. He was behaving kind of sketchy, is the word that I would use. And I know that there's probably young people in the audience or people that are watching this that might not know what the word sketchy is. But it just, he's just acting, he's off.
Right.
And I can't put my finger on it. Because he was in the construction business. And so sometimes he would leave for a week at a time and be really unreachable. And at the time, my gut told me that was really wrong. He should be reachable. But still, I thought, well, he's working. Maybe he doesn't have cell phone signal. We have to also remember this is, 18 years ago.
Yes.
So that's happening. Financially, he's not really helping. So I'm holding the burden financially. I'm paying the house note. I'm paying the car notes. I'm paying for everything at this point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's really not helping financially, but he's got this business where he's supposed to be making money, but he's not, right? Like, so he always had some excuse that, his business isn't making any money, so he really doesn't have anything to contribute.
Okay.
So that's happening at this time. So if we look at maybe me being approximately a year into program, I get pregnant.
Okay.
And I think it's probably important to note too that he and I had this in and out relationship where we don't want to be married anymore, but we're going to work it out. We're not going to be married anymore, and we're going to work it out. So there's that turmoil going on, right?
Right.
So year into program, I get pregnant, and over this time, that I'm going to program, I had invited my ex-husband to go, but he really didn't want any part of it, right?
Right.
And so I'm slowly and gradually changing and growing, and he's not, but I'm still hanging on to that hope that he will, that he will change, and that maybe he'll come around and he'll want to be different. But now that I'm pregnant, I'm now starting to enter into that, oh my gosh, I don't want to live this way, right? Like, I'm starting to get those feelings of I don't want to raise a child this way. I don't want to live this way anymore. But now that I'm pregnant, I'm afraid to be alone, right? Like, nobody wants to raise a child alone, right? Like, nobody goes into this saying, yay, I'm, going to raise this kid by myself. So anyway, there's a little bit of that starting to seep in that I don't, I don't want to raise my child this way.
So this is a year into program.
Ish.
You've known Diane how many years at this point?
So 6. So when I'm pregnant, 5 or 6 years, something like that, timeline wise, yeah.
Okay. So obviously, her relationship with you is very significant. Can you describe for us a specific moment when her example of unconditional love made a huge impact on your life?
Yeah, I can actually. Oh my gosh, there's so many to pick from. I love Diane so much.
Yeah.
So I can just cry. Like, seriously, we should always keep Kleenexes in here. Yeah. So when I was pregnant, I was at the end of my first trimester, and I guess I should back up a little bit. When I was first pregnant, I miscarried. And I think we talked about that a little bit in the very beginning. And so a month later after, you miscarry, whatever, you go back to the doctor and they kind of check you out, and it turns out I was still pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so technically they have said that Weston, my son, was supposed to be a twin. So here I am, still pregnant. Right. I know, it's crazy.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it's really kind of a crazy story. So I'm still pregnant, and I make it through my first trimester taking medication because my body doesn't produce a particular hormone that I needed, and so I'm taking these hormones, and I end up on bed rest after my first trimester because I ended up with a tear in my placenta.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hard to be on bed rest from, I think it was like 20 weeks on. And I have to remember my ex-husband is kind of hit or miss. He's sometimes around, sometimes not around. And so I'm on bed rest, and Diane is coming to my house regularly and having one-on-one Al-Anon meetings with me because now I can't get to meetings, right? And so she's coming over, and we're reading literature together, and we're working the 12 steps, and she's bringing me food because I'm really not supposed to be out of the bed. And one night, I just remember I was crying and crying and crying because I realized that I'm going to do this by myself. And and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to raise this child alone. And I remember her holding my hand and saying, Mandy, you may not have a husband, but you're not alone. You're not going to be alone anymore. And you see, I'm going to cry. That was so important to me because, I've got this sense of abandonment. And for the first time, I really feel like, she's not going to leave me. I'm not going to have to do this alone. And that was so monumental. That's, and so if you fast forward, I still have to go to doctor's appointments where I do have to get out of the bed. Mm-hmm. And she comes and she picks me up. She's the one who takes me to every single appointment. Not my ex-husband. She did. She made sure I got there. She made sure I was where I needed to be. She made sure I was okay, and held my hand through the whole thing. She was there the day that my son was born. Wow. One of the few people who were, that's still part of his life, that was there that day. So that is one of those times that I could tell you so many more, but that one so stands out to me. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Oh
yeah.
My gosh.
Anyway.
I'm so glad that you'd met Diane and that she was present because clearly
yes, she changed my life.
I'm kind of my jaw's on the ground right now, so forgive me that I'm like speechless.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, she does that to people.
So backtracking, you're entered this new realm, if you will, if we can call Al-Anon like this new universe. How did your reasons for joining Al-Anon evolve from wanting to fix your ex-husband and not disappointing Diane because she was like, I pick you every Monday, and you're like, oh, okay, to now you're actively taking agency in this and seeking a better life for your son, Weston.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Initially, when I got into program, I was there looking for solutions on how to make my ex-husband behave. That's really what I wanted. And I think you'll hear that from a lot of people who get into Al-Anon as they really initially go, because they want to get somebody sober or they want to change somebody else, mm-hmm. right? So that is originally why I started going. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I stuck around because I didn't want to disappoint Diane. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I get pregnant, right? And so, as I said, I started to get these feelings of I don't want to raise a child the way that I was raised, which is how this was feeling with my ex-husband. And so I start seeing and attending meetings because I want to break the cycle, right? And I know that's a common phrase that you hear. Alcoholism runs deep in my side and my ex-husband's side of the family, and I am determined that I'm going to break the cycle because I don't want Weston to grow up that way, right? But I'm still teetering on that fence of I haven't quite gotten that really it's a program for me, mm-hmm. for myself, for self-reflection. So I'm still kind of teetering on that. I'm really here for Weston, but sort of here for myself, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's a lot to process, though, definitely. And so proud of you for having come out the other side.
Thank you.
So I'm catching everybody up. As of today, you aren't married to your first husband anymore.
No.
And it's been for a while. Do you mind sharing with us what happened? And why do you consider this to be the biggest blessing in your life?
Yeah. I like to call it the Christmas disaster. I am not married to him anymore. I think it's, again, you and I talked about this. It's important to note that I hung around in that marriage longer than I should have, but it was a blessing. I'm grateful that I was married to him, and I'm grateful that I divorced him. But let's talk about what really, nail in the coffin for me that gave me the biggest awakening on Christmas,
Yeah.
when my son was little, he was not a year old yet.
Yeah.
I had gone to Ohio to visit my sister, so I'm staying with my sister and her husband. My brother's there, my sister's kids, and my ex-husband. So we're all up there, and on Christmas morning, he was asleep, and his phone rang. This is very much a Jerry Springer story. So I don't know if all of our listeners know who Jerry Springer is, but it was this crazy talk show back in the 90s or 80s and 90s where all these crazy things happened on Jerry Springer. Anyway, if you don't know, look it up. And he's sleeping in the bed and his phone rings, and I answered his phone. And this woman asks to speak to him, which I didn't find too terribly strange at the time because he was an electrician and he did get a lot of calls, especially in emergency situations where people needed, some electrical work done, especially if their power goes out in the middle of the night or they have, some kind of issue. So that did happen. So, but on Christmas morning, I did find it a little strange, and so I asked, this woman. I said, "Well, he's sleeping. Can I take a message?" And she said, "Yeah, tell him so and so called." And I'll be honest, I don't even remember this woman's name. And I said, "Do you mind telling me how you know him?" And she said, there's this strange pause because I could tell her she was feeling awkward, like I was feeling awkward. And she said, "Well, we've been dating for 3 years." Right? And at that moment, I'm like, "What? I've been married to him for the last 4, and I'm holding his son, to his son." And she couldn't believe it. She had no idea. She had no idea whatsoever that he was married with a child. And so it got really awkward from there. Anyway, she ended up hanging up on me. I can understand why she'd hang up because she's in just as much a shock as I am, right? Yeah. And so, of course, I wake him up to say, "What is happening?" There was this woman on the phone. And so anyway, so, of course, I'm upset and crying. I'm holding Weston, and I'm holding his phone, and he wants his phone back. He's angry. He was very angry that I answered his phone and very angry that I wouldn't give him his phone back, right? Because of course I'm like, what the heck? What else is in this phone, right?
Right.
And because I wouldn't give him his phone back, he hit me while I was holding Weston. He hit me in the face.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was bad. And I know I shared a little bit before about he was aggressive, but he'd never been physically hurtful to me in the time that I knew him. I will say that this was a once and only. So I will give him that, and I know not that there's any excuse for what he did, but I will say that it had never ever happened, and it had only happened once, and I was only going to let it happen once.
Thank goodness.
So my brother-in-law, my sister, this is all happening. They come upstairs, and from there they pretty much threw him out, and they said, "Here's your stuff. Don't come back." We'll spare you all the rest of the details, but that day, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I was never going to go back to being that person that I brought into this marriage.
Yeah.
When he and I got together, we were both sick. And I use the word sick. It could be unhealthy. We both came from alcoholic backgrounds. Right. His manifested in one way, mine manifested in another way. And I realized that I picked him. That there was something wrong with me too. He wasn't the only one who brought this to the marriage. You know what I mean? He wasn't the only one to blame. And so I realized at that moment, I got to work on me. This is not. Yes, Weston will benefit if we can break the cycle, but I've got to work on me. You know what I mean? I'm the only person who can fix this situation. I can't expect him to change. I can't, try to change, what Weston's environment unless I work on me. And so to answer your question about the biggest blessing, I'm so grateful that I met him. And I'm so grateful that I married him because I wouldn't have found program.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't have found it as early as I did. Um, and I'm so grateful that I divorced him. You know, but at the same time, I got Weston. I got our son. And he's such a blessing in my life, you know. And anything bad that I would say about my ex-husband would be like saying bad about half about Weston, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm grateful for him. Al-Anon in general has given me so many tools in handling situations in my life, of handling the effects of alcoholism. You know, take what you like and leave the rest is something that I learned there. You know, it's so important to me that, you know, take the good things with you. You know, not everything is going to be good. You know, problems are the gifts we grow from, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a gift. That Christmas was such a gift that shaped my journey in Al-Anon, because I'm going to move forward really and truly looking at myself and working on myself and trying to be a better person for not only myself, but for Weston, because let it begin with me, right? And then that's the only way. If I want to see change, I got to start with me. And I had never, ever thought that prior to meeting Diane, being in Al-Anon. So, yeah, gift, big gift.
The last question I'm going to ask is, you know, when you share about your ex-husband, there's not anger, there's not hostility with you. Like, what was, you know, what did you learn in program to be able to adopt that attitude, to not be bitter and actually be very grateful, like appreciative, which is, it feels so counterintuitive to say that. How'd you come to that?
Yeah, there's so many things that I've learned in program that has helped me not be resentful and bitter. And attitude is one of them. It's funny that you would say that. And early on in the beginning, when I first started working with Diane, she used to have me make this gratitude list all the time, you know, and she would tell me, you need to have an attitude of gratitude. And it was a constant, everyday process of going through and thinking of things that I was grateful for, because it wasn't intuitive. And she said, let's just start with the simple things. Did you have food on your table today? Did you have a roof over your head? Wow. Did your car get you to work? I mean, it was all those things of learning to have an attitude of gratitude. One of the other things was not having a resentment. You know, she would teach me that, and all of the people that are in program with me would teach me that, you know, having a resentment is like drinking poison and hoping someone else dies. And that made so much sense to me. You know, there's just so many things that they have taught us, you know, and that we teach each other. Another one is, I want to be better. I don't want to be bitter. You know, it's a terrible way to live life, being bitter. You know, I want to be better. I don't want to be bitter. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have Weston if it wasn't for him. So how can I not be grateful? You know?
That's so incredible.
Yeah. It's been an incredible journey. You know, I tell people all the time, if you'd have known me 20 years ago, we probably wouldn't be friends. You know, I was a very different person. You know, I had all kinds of coping mechanisms for dealing with alcoholism. I surrounded myself with unhealthy people. I just wasn't, I'm so different now. And I think you attract, you know, the kind of people that you are, you know, what you attract. So, and I'm a happy, positive person today, and I think that I attract those kinds of people now. You know, and back then I attracted people who weren't that way because I wasn't, if that makes sense. Yeah, so
that's incredible. Oh my gosh. And I just really want to point out and commend you, like, in spite of everything that had happened and the behavior of your ex-husband and the actions he took, you still refuse to say anything negative about him. Mm-hmm.
I try not to. I really do try not to. It'd be like saying something negative about Weston.
Wow.
Yeah, because that's not. I mean, he's a sick person. I wish the best for him. I hope he gets help. I do. Mm-hmm. I think anybody who's in that sort of situation, all you can do is pray for them. How can you want blessings if you don't want the same ones for others, right? So, yeah.
So seriously, kudos to you for having that realization that, like, I mean, I could totally, I think if I was in your situation, I would be tempted to trash talk and play, like, just be like, I'm the victim here, look what he did to me, da 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 da. But you've refused to do that, and out of acknowledgement for how that's going to impact your son.
Yeah.
That's so commendable.
Thank you. Thank you.
So speaking of Weston.
Yeah, so we decided at the end of every one of our episodes that we're going to give a shout out to somebody who has been instrumental in helping us get this podcast launched. Again, back to that attitude of gratitude. So we want to make sure that we're letting people know that we're grateful for the things that they've given to us for fun and for free to help us on our journey of sharing these stories with other people. So who are we giving a shout out today?
We're going to shout out Weston Jones's business. What's it called?
Boulder Lens Photography. So my son is starting a photography business. He's been awesome in letting us use his camera, his lighting. He's taken pictures for us. He helps us with editing. He's really been amazing. So he's being a little entrepreneur now. And started a photography business. So big shout out to him. Thank you. We wouldn't be here today. He actually, right before we started this podcast today, was up here setting up, showing us how to use the camera still and how to use the microphones and the lighting. So it's Boulder Lens Photography. At the end of this episode, we'll drop that link to his website in the notes. So thank you to him. I love that he's given for fun and for free and given back to the community like his mom.
Yeah. And we're so grateful for him to help us launch, and we want to return the favor and launch him. And Boulder as in rock boulder, but play on words like bold, like be bold.
That's right. Very clever of him. Boulder Lens Photography. Thanks for pointing that out. So anyway, in our next episode, we're going to talk about the boons, which are the gifts of my journey and the impact of the community. So we're really looking forward to another episode. So be sure to hit like, subscribe, and follow us. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
We hope you stay on and catch episode 3, where we come to the amazing conclusion of your journey. So stay tuned. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, hit like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to email us at monomythdiaries@gmail.com with your monomyth and keep the conversations going.
Until next time, heroes, let's journey together through stories.